Sabbath to you all from four corners of the world. I'd like to greet you all and say to you, blessed Sabbath, as we are going to meet to discuss the present truth. It's our privilege to know all these truths before Christ comes to join us. And so our study today, the topic I have chosen is Matthew chapter 13, verse 30, which says, let both grow together until the harvest. Is Revelation 18 that harvest that was promised? Because Christ promised us that all the wheat and the tares should grow together until the harvest. Not until he comes, but until the harvest. So, is Matthew 18 that harvest? That's our question, as we are going to study today to see this harvest, how it is, what nature of harvest was Christ talking about. Now, before we go on, let's go to what Sister White herself has said would happen when she dies. Go to manuscript release, February 24, 1915. We all know that Sister White died in 1915. And before she died, she made us have a big warning from her dying lips. And what did she say? Right?
I tell you now that when I am laid to rest, great changes will take place.
She said that in the movement that she was leading of Sabbath keepers, that after she is laid to rest, the enemy was going to rush in to distort a lot of things. She said, I tell you now that when I'm laid to rest, great changes will take place. There will be great changes. Now, let's hear. I want
the people to know that I warned them fully before my death.
She said, I'm warning you before I'm fully laid to the grave, that when I die, there will be more changes to her movement. She said that. So this warning gives you and I a heads up to say, let's find out for ourselves what did change. Because she warned us. She said, and I've warned you. If you read on the quotation, you find the word warned is in capital letters. That's what she said. I've warned you that when I'm fully laid to the grave, things will change. So it means before she died, there were so many things that wanted to be changed, which she was fighting not to change. And she saw her death was going to bring rise to those changes. So for you and I to meet and study and dig deeper, this is what God is calling for in the last days. So now let's for us to start, let's start with testimony to ministers, which is TM 234.2. It's a bit longish. Let's hear what she said there.
The looker on may discern no difference,
right?
But there is one who said that the tares were not to be plucked up by human hands,
right,
lest the wheat be rooted up also.
So you see, the warning of the harvest, which Christ said was, because the disciples wanted to pluck the tares, but he says, no. That's not going to be done by anybody at this time. Because when you pluck off the tares, you will pluck off the wheat. He gave a stern warning for us not to disfellowship people out of our churches. Christ said, if you pluck, you will not be able to know which one is a tare and a wheat. But at the time of the harvest, you will know who is who. Now, before we enter the pearly gates, before we enter in the kingdom, we will be knowing each other. We will be knowing who is a tare, and we will be knowing who is a wheat. How will we know? Because God will give us a message, which those who are wheat will be clustered together. Those who are tares will be clustered together. We will know the differences in the camp. The camp will bring differences because the wheat will be pronounced. and the tares will be pronounced. They will know each other. Now here is saying the difference at that time when Christ was seeing the wheat and tares together, the disciples wouldn't see the difference. But these differences, as we are towards the harvest, as we are in the harvest, they are more marked. Do you understand? Now read on here. Start here.
Let both grow together
Right.
until the harvest.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Then the Lord sends forth his reapers
Right.
to gather out the tares and bind them in bundles to burn.
Now most people think it's Christ going to come himself to separate the wheat and the tares. But God says he will send reapers. When we sing and say, Lord of harvest, send forth reapers. We are calling for these reapers to come and do the harvest, which Christ promised. Let both grow together until the harvest. When in the harvest, we will know who is God's people and who is not. That will separate who is going to the pearly gates and who is not. The harvest, the reapers have been promised. And these reapers will come and proclaim a message which will separate the wheat from the tares. This is what Christ is promising. Let's read on there.
Then the Lord sends forth his reapers
Right.
to gather out the tares
Right.
and bind them in bundles to burn,
Right?
while the wheat is gathered into the heavenly garner.
Right?
The time of the judgment is a most solemn period, when the Lord gathers his own from among the tares.
Now, this time of the harvest, it's a solemn period. We call it harvest or the time of judgment. That time is the time of the sealing program. This sealing program is a solemn time in heaven because it's a time when the wheat is separated from the tares. They are all bundled, but what causes all this is a message. That's why my question is Revelation 18 the message to separate the wheat from the tares? Is it truly the message to separate the wheat from the tares? But how are they separated? He will send forth reapers with a message to separate the wheat from the tares. This is what we have been told. Now read on.
Those who have been members of the same family are
This is
separated.
what happens before Christ comes. When the message of Revelation 18, which has been promised to come and separate the wheat from the tares, those from the same family will be separated. This is what Sister White has written in Testimonies to Ministers, page 234. It says, when these reapers will come with the message, it will separate even families. You see, we are in a solemn period. When families are separated, you find one family who believes in the message from the reapers, and the other family fighting those who believe the message from the reapers. Is it not this time which was promised by Christ, where he will send forth reapers to separate the wheat from the tares? As I say, is it Revelation 18? Sent to separate the wheat from the tares. It says, come out of Babylon, my people. What was Babylon? Confusion. What is confusion? Confusion. We have seen this confusion that came from Nimrod. We saw it. It's confusion when people are made to worship the sun. People are made to worship death and making them gods. Christ's birthday. We have seen all that confusion. So when he says, come out of Babylon, my people, you'll see why he singled out the city Babylon. Why he's singling it out is because of that confusion, that Babel coming from Nimrod on the Tower of Babel, making sure they build a tower against God's will. Now, are there people who are worshiping God against his will? Now, we see it starting from the house of God. It says, come out of it, my people. And I've seen people, blowing this to other people or to the world and say Revelation 18 comes to the world. Now, it comes first. No messages come straight from God to the world and then the church. No, it comes first to the church and then the world. Now, if you have Revelation chapter 14 verse 8 by William Miller, came straight to the church which was there separated them when they were waiting for the coming of Christ. It separated and created what was called Advent believers. They were separated by Revelation 14 verse 8. And we were told that Revelation 14 verse 8 will be repeated. And when it is repeated, we see it in Revelation 18. Come out of here, my people. When? In our time. Now, let's study how this happens. And it says, read on. It says, how is this harvest done? We have seen one family is being separated by reapers being sent in the time of the harvest. Now, the time of the judgment, now read from there, the time of the judgment is a most solemn period. Yeah.
The time of the judgment is a most solemn period when the Lord gathers his own from among the tares.
That's what he will be doing in the time of harvest, when the reapers are preaching the message. And what? Right?
Those who have been members of the same family are separated.
Is it not happening at our time? We see some families believing the feast, some families fighting those who are believing the feast in the same family. Is it not the harvest time? Is it the message that God said, I will send forth reapers? And when this message is proclaimed, it will separate families. Yeah? And what?
A mark is placed upon the righteous.
Is it not this time when the mark is placed upon the righteous? First in the church, first in the house of God. Is it not this time that was promised by Christ that I will send forth reapers? Is it not? Right? A mark is blessed.
They shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts.
And when the mark is blessed, he says, they shall be mine. They shall be mine. They are sealed to be Christ. They will never, once you get the seal, which is a settling into truth. Now we saw the seal in early writing, page 15. It had 3 seals: God, New Jerusalem, and a glorious star containing Jesus. In the house of God, there are people who are sealed with these 3 seals. And there are some who completely do not know what a seal is. It is there, separating the wheat from the tares. A mark is placed to those who have the wheat. Yeah? Because the early writing is telling us what is the seal. It says it is the 144,000 were seen, and their forehead had God, New Jerusalem, and a glorious star containing Jesus' new name. And we said Jesus' new name is the branch. Now, is it not happening in the house of God, in those who believe in the coming of Christ, the Sabbath believers? Is it not happening? A mark is placed in the forehead of the believers. And it says, they shall be mine. And what is this period? It is the harvest period. It is the period Christ promised. Let both grow together until this period of the sealing process. Now, I'm saying, who are God's people? The people who are going to be sealed with the 3 seals. Early writing 15. Now, read it again. Early writing, page 15. Read it so that we hear, is it the seal? But you find people who say, no, the seal is just the Sabbath. So, there are people who say the seal are the 3 seals in early writing. Read.
The 144,000 were all sealed and perfectly united. On their foreheads was written, God, New Jerusalem, and a glorious star containing Jesus' new name.
So those who say the seal is the Sabbath, yes, that's the first seal. It says God, those are the Sabbath. But what about New Jerusalem? Is the keeping of these feasts 3 times a year in Jerusalem. That's another seal. That's why in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 16, it says, if anyone does not come for these feasts, for the Feast of Tabernacle, which is the last feast, there will be no rain. So you see people are being sealed with the next seal, which is New Jerusalem. And then the last seal, which is Jesus' new name, which we found in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 12, that he is called the branch. From 1844, he entered in the Holy of Holies. It says so in Great Controversy, page 415, that is the name he assumed when he entered the Holy of Holies to start interceding. Now, there will be people who believe these 3-fold truths, who God says, they shall be mine. They shall be. I'm asking, who are God's people right now? Now, we are saying here, there is a time of separation, or the harvest, which was promised in Matthew chapter 13, verse 30. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the harvest, it's not the time for Christ to come, but it's the time for this solemn event of separating the wheat from the tares. This is what God calls the harvest. This is a solemn period which the whole heavenly universe is looking forward to, for the wheat to be separated from the tares. But what are they separate? What separates them is a mark. It's the sealing. It's the sealing. Those who are sealed will have a mark. Will have a mark. And what is the mark? Sister White has said it. They had 3 seals. God, New Jerusalem, and a glorious star containing Jesus' new name. It's there also in Revelation chapter 3, verse 12. It says, these are the 3 seals which the overcomers will be given. Let's hear from Revelation chapter 3, verse 12. It says so. This is the seal. This Sister White saw. And even Revelation has seen, I've seen people say, oh, it's only Sister White, but the Bible doesn't say so. Sister White will not utter anything which is not in the Bible. Yeah? Sister White will not utter. And someone was saying, oh, this sealing, which is in Ezekiel 9, people believe there was going to be a slaughter. People who are false and satanic. I said, hey, hang on there. Let's go to the Bible. It says in Ezekiel chapter 9 clearly, verse 4 up to 7, it says there is a slaughter. And then I said, if you can't believe the Bible, go to the Spirit of Prophecy in Testimonies to Ministers, volume 5, page 211. It says there is a slaughter. So if both the Bible and Sister White are wrong, then who is then wrong? Who is wrong? Who is wrong? Now, if things are in the Spirit of Prophecy and in the Bible, then that's clearly a truth. That's a clear truth. Anything other than that is false. Now, read from the Revelation chapter 3, verse 12. What is the seal?
Him that overcometh,
right,
will I make a pillar in the temple of my God.
Right.
And he shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God.
What?
And the name of the city of my God.
What?
Which is New Jerusalem.
Right. And the third
which
one?
Cometh down out of heaven from
Right.
my God.
Right.
And I will write upon him my
new name. Is Sister White saying things out of context? It is there in Revelation chapter 3, verse 12. 3 verse 12 says 3 seals, and Sister White says 3 seals. I don't know where you are coming from with another seal which is not in these 2 books, the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy. Any writing, page 15 says 3 seals. And Revelation chapter 3 verse 12 says 3 seals. That's what we believe. Who are God's people? Because we know at this time there are people who are not God's people. They come off with all sorts of things that they call seals. But we will stand by what the Bible says. The overcomers will be written those 3 seals. And any writing from Sister White says, there were written God, New Jerusalem, and a glorious star. And that is what Sister White is saying, Testimonies to Ministers, 234, that the overcomers, God is putting a mark on the overcomers. Overcoming what? Overcoming all this apostasy, all this prophecy, all these falsehoods from Babylon. You overcome. Once you overcome, you shall not go anywhere back. You will be a pillar in the temple of God. That's what Revelation has said, isn't it? So, let's read. It says, he is on from among the tares. The time of the judgment. Repeat that one.
They shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them, as a man spareth his own son that severeth him.
Right? So you see the mark. It also causes you to be spared from the time of trouble such as never. We have already started this time of trouble. Look at the pestilences. God is promising, with the sealing process, I will spare them. Look at what is happening. Look at where we are going, strife and commotion. It is there. But God is saying, once you have been sealed, once a mark is placed to his own, he will spare them. He says so. And then?
Those who have been obedient to God's commandments will unite with the company of the saints in light.
Right.
They shall enter in through the gates into the city.
Right.
And
so this seal will make those who have been faithful in the laws of God, which the 10 Commandments, the moral law, and the feast, the ceremonial law, they are all bundled together. Why? Because that's what makes what is called God's people. You understand?
And here, okay, those who have been obedient to God's commandments will unite with the company of the saints in light.
Right?
They shall enter in through the gates into the city and have right to the tree of life.
Right?
The one shall be taken. His name shall stand in the book of life.
Right?
While those with whom he associated shall have the mark of eternal separation from God.
This is what will separate people. Let both grow together until the harvest. What is separating the people? The seal. A mark is placed so that you enter in the city. It did not say so that you enter in the cloud, but in the city where the kingdom will be established. That's where we enter first. And when he's talking about the harvest, he is getting our mind back to what we do in the field. What do we do in the field? When we sow our plants, they are there together with the wheat and tares. But when a time comes, the reapers, the farmer, goes to separate the wheat from the tares. And what does he do? He does not take it straight into the barn. No, it's taken first to be threshed. Do you understand? It will be threshed and made into further harvested in the barn. And then at last, that's when we are supposed to go to heaven. You know? So this process in the field is exactly the process which God is using. In our language, they say you take into the Ingalani, yeah? And then after that, after Ingalani, you go into Ihoz, you know? So there is a process. So here, Ingalani is the kingdom. And then after the kingdom, where do you go? Hoz, to be stored in heaven. So this is the process that God is going to follow in his harvest. Now, let us read again from 2 Esau 164.1. Start with, when the judgment opened in 1844. We know Christ went into the Holy of Holies in 1844. Let's find out more about that. Because Sister White warned us. I warn you, things will change after I'm laid to the. She was so scared that when she is gone, things will change. She knew the Uriah Smiths, they were there. They were after her. They were against her. They caused everyone to reject the 1888 message. It's there. We read it at the time. So she knew all that. So she knew that her foes will take over and change things. So we have to dig deeper and find out so that we are left upright with God. Now, when the judgment
opened in 1844,
right,
as previously explained, the investigation began with the dead.
Right. So we were told in 483, great controversy, 483, that the investigative judgment starts first with the dead and then proceeds to the living. So we are in the judgment of the living, which is the harvest. The judgment of the living is the harvest, which we are talking about, which is the sealing or the mark. Then, if we all agree that we are in the sealing process, then we are in the judgment for the living. Now, read on.
When the judgment opened in 1844, as previously explained, the investigation began with the dead.
Right.
And when that part of the work is finished, then commences the judgment of the living.
Right. What I've just said, right? Read on.
While the investigation for the congregation of the dead is in progress,
right,
there can be no separation among the congregation of the living.
Now, when in 1844, Christ started with the investigation from the death of Abel. That's the first death, isn't it? And it was still the investigation for the dead. There was nothing to separate. Nothing. They were just investigating the books. But the solemn period is when the investigation proceeded to the living, which I say the investigation proceeded to the living in 1977. How I come to that date is another prophecy. But for now, let's believe it started in 1977. So when 1955, sorry, not 1977. When it started in 1955, the investigating judgment for the living. This is the time when now he is investigating those who are going to meet Christ before tasting death. And those who are going to have the seal, the 3 seals, will never taste death. Why? Because it's a seal of immortality. That's why he said, they shall be mine, they will be protected. You will take care of them. What does he mean by take care? What is happening when you are sealed? We understood when Cain killed Abel, you remember that time. Cain was told to go to a country and God was going to set a mark on him that nobody will kill him. But when you go to the spirit of prophecy, it will tell you that the only mark that was set on Cain was he had an extra protection from angels. So when you are getting these 3 seals, the angels are doubled on a soul who gets the 3 seals. What do I mean? Where are they coming from, these angels? It says so in the spirit of prophecy. Those who rejected the seal will lose their angels. Did you hear that? They lose their angels by rejecting the seals. They will lose their angels. And when the seal is God, which is the Sabbath, and the New Jerusalem, which are the feasts, and Jesus' new name, which is the name of the branch, how many people have rejected those things? So it means they will lose their angels. And where do those angels go to? They go to those who have accepted the seals. And they are doubled. This is the protection God is promising those who have received the seal. What else would God do? Would he spare his angels to go and protect somebody who rejects the seals? This is a solemn period. It's a period, even the angels. That's why Sister I said, I saw angels hurrying to and fro. Why? Instead, when they are going to John, they now leave John alone. They go to Luke. Oh, when Luke rejects, they go to another one who accepts. They leave the people who are refusing the last message of mercy. It's there in the spirit of prophecy. Now here we are seeing the judgment starts first in the judgment of the dead. It started from 1844. But we are now in the judgment of the living, where a mark is being placed on those who accept the seal. By accepting the seals, accepting the messages coming with the seal. What is a seal? A settling into truth so that you are not moved. Which truth? These 3-fold truths. Settle in them, you are receiving the seal, and the angels double to make protection. Did you hear that? Now read on. When it's coming to the judgment of the living, understand what is happening in the judgment of the living.
While the investigation for the congregation of the dead is in progress,
right,
there can be no separation among the congregation of the living.
So, while it's in 1844, the congregation of the living continued to be intact. There was no disfellowshipping or nothing. There was no, arguments in the congregation of the living, because Christ was still in the congregation of the dead, investigating the dead. But read on.
But when our high priest shall begin the atonement for the living, there must be a message of present truth, sounding of the trumpet.
When the investigative judgment starts with the living, the very first thing the reapers are given a message. Did you hear that? And what?
There must be a message of present truth, sounding of the trumpet, urging everyone to lay hold of the Lamb of God, Christ, by which only can he in figure come to the sanctuary, confess his sin, and secure his life.
That's the message which is there. Come to the sanctuary. What is in the sanctuary? These sanctuary laws that we are proclaiming as if they are nailed to the cross, they are the ones brought back to this that are being investigated for the living. It's investigation for you to receive the seal to live. What message? The message of the sanctuary, which was promised to Daniel, that unto 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. These all messages, the laws of the sanctuary, are brought back as it was in Moses' time. Did you hear? And what?
Unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement of for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth while the judgment for the living is in season.
So we should have a new message in the judgment of the living. In the judgment of the dead, there was a prophet, which was Sister White. In the judgment of the living, there should be a prophet who is proclaiming a message for those who are receiving the seal. If you and I believe that the seal is being received, then there should be a proclaimer of the seal. The message in the seal comes with someone proclaiming it. That's why we see in Malachi chapter 4, verse 4 to 5, that I will send Elijah the prophet with the message of the sanctuary. Which one? Of the statutes and judgments. The sanctuary laws are brought back. Which are these feasts that we are rejecting? Now read on.
Neither would such judgment be legal or just.
How then do we expect God to judge if he is not going to judge using a message? So he throws a message and he assesses the spiritual condition of the people. The wheat will grab the message, the tares will refuse the message. This is what is happening. That's how people will receive the seal and some will reject it. Why? There is a message. There is a prophet proclaiming a message. The reapers are proclaiming the message, and the wheat and the tares are dancing the tune, one to each side and the other to the other side. This is what is happening in the judgment of the living. Did you understand that? Now,
okay. He who fails to respond to the heavenly summons will be left without the seal of covering of God.
This is what happens. The seal, once you are left without a seal, what is a seal? It's a covering for protection. That's why it's a seal of immortality. This is a seal, or the message is the one that protects you. That makes God double the angels to give you protection, because it's a seal of immortality. Why? You are getting ready for the grand work when Christ comes in the kingdom to use you now to collect the whole harvest of the world. Loud cry. We haven't started the loud cry. It starts in the house of God. The loud cry starts in the house of God. It is already in the house of God right now. If we believe it's sealing time, then it's the loud cry in the house of God. When he comes to start the kingdom, he tests the 144,000. That's why we see the 144,000 on Mount Zion with Christ, now fully geared for the loud cry of the whole world. He sent the 144,000 to collect them with the same message of the sanctuary laws, judgment of the living. Did you understand it? Now read on.
He who fails to respond to the heavenly summons will be left without the seal or covering of God, and therefore must be cut off from among his people, as prefigured by the services in the typical Day of Atonement.
Was it happening in the typical service? On the Day of Atonement, what was happening? Those who did not confess their sins were put together with the court of Azazel, cut off. Now the same thing will happen when Christ comes in the kingdom. Those who did not respond to the seal are cut off. Now how? By Ezekiel 9. Someone said Ezekiel 9 is a falsehood, is a what? But let's read it. Ezekiel 9. Is it not cutting off people? Ezekiel 9. And I said, let's read it properly and tell me, where is it false? Where is the falsehood from Ezekiel 9? Now, Ezekiel 9 verse 4, yeah.
And the Lord said unto him,
right?
Or shall I start in 3?
Verse 4. Okay.
And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done. So there is a man
in Incon, which is Christ. But what we see is the reapers sending the message. But behind these reapers is Christ himself. Go through the midst of the city and set a sign. This is the only time we are receiving the seal or the sign. This is the time in the harvest.
And to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark.
Is it not this separation which God has called upon and said, when Christ comes in the kingdom, when the kingdom is established, this is what will be going on in the judgment beginning in the house of God. This is what will be happening. If you say it's falsehood, then what is it? What is it? What do you think? When is the period when Christ set a sign or a seal in our forehead? When is it? Now, if you want to know it's not falsehood, we want Sister White will show us exactly that it is literal and it is still future to us. That's what she says. Things will change when I go. When I die, things will change. Now, read in 5T, Testimonies for the Church, volume 5, page 211. Right?
The class
right?
who do not feel grieved over their own spiritual declension,
right?
nor mourn over the sins of others, will be left without the seal of God.
Right?
The Lord commissions his messengers, the men with slaughtering weapons in
right?
their hand.
Right?
Go ye after him through the city and smite.
Right?
Let not your eyes
you
spare.
See, she's repeating the same verse of Ezekiel 9. Yeah.
Neither have ye pity.
Right?
Slay utterly old and young,
right?
Both maids and little children,
right?
And women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark,
right?
And begin at my sanctuary.
Right.
Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house.
Why the ancient men? Because they are influencing people that this is not going to happen. They are telling you it's falsehood that this is happening. That's why he starts with them. He says, what? Read.
Here we see that the church, right? The Lord's sanctuary.
Did you hear Sister White saying, where is this slaughter? Right?
Church. The church,
right?
The Lord's sanctuary,
right?
Was the first to feel the stroke of the wrath of God.
Did you see what Sister White is saying? Yeah.
The ancient men, those to whom God had given great light,
right?
And who had stood as guardians of the spiritual interests of the people.
They stood against Ezekiel 9. They tell you that you see these people, they're preaching about Ezekiel 9, they're false, they're what? But Sister White is preaching about Ezekiel 9. Sister White. So if you're against Sister White, then who are you? We are Sabbath believers. We believe in Sister White. I don't know who you are. Because that's what Sister White says about Ezekiel 9. So these ancient of men, that's why God says, start with them. Why? Because they tell you this is falsehood. This is what, listen to what they say. Yeah.
Okay. They had taken the position that we need not look for miracles,
right?
And the marked manifestation of God's power as in the former days.
You see how they deny Ezekiel 9?
Times have changed.
They say times have changed.
These words strengthen their unbelief.
Strengthen their unbelief. They say, oh, these people are warning us. There's going to be a slaughter of Ezekiel 9. And they're strengthening their unbelief. And what?
The Lord, these words strengthen their unbelief. Right? And they say, the Lord will not do
any good.
Neither will he do evil.
He doesn't do any evil. He just stays. The heaven is just quiet. Nothing is going to happen. Right?
He is too merciful.
He is merciful
to visit his people in judgment.
He cannot destroy his people. That's what they tell you.
Thus peace and safety
and they are preaching a peace
is
and
the cry
gospel
for men who will never again lift up their voice like a trumpet.
They will never again lift their voice like a trumpet to warn the people of the impending judgment which is about to happen. Right? And
thus, peace and safety is the cry for men who will never again lift up their voice like a trumpet.
If you hear anyone telling you that this Ezekiel 9 slaughter is something else, go to Testimonies for the Church, volume 5, page 211, and see Sister White telling you about that slaughter and know who you are talking to. Now, let's go back to the harvest. We want to go back and understand the harvest. It says, how will people be harvested? When a mark is set on the forehead, it is already separating the wheat from the tares. For how are the wheat separated from the tares? They are separated by receiving this threefold message in their forehead. And this will create a shaking in the church. Why? Because there are some who will believe the 3 seals and there are some who will not believe the 3 seals. But at the end, this is the wheat which is bundled, and the tares are also bundled against each other because of these 3 seals. And what happens when the kingdom starts? When Christ shall come, he first sends his angels, like he did on the Passover when he was in Egypt. He first sent the angels to separate the people from his own people who were marching out of Egypt, going towards. Yeah? So this is what will happen. When that happens, the end of the world, we are at the end of the world. When Christ comes now to take all this wheat out, I mean, the wheat outside from the tares. This is the separation. This is the harvest God has been preaching about. And when this message is proclaimed, it is proclaimed before Christ comes. And it is proclaimed by the reapers who come with a message in the time of the harvest. With Christ's promise, let both grow together. Do not separate until the harvest. So the time the wheat were growing together is since 1844. They were growing together with the tares from 1844. And because the judgment was still with the dead, it started with the dead. But when now the judgment extends to the living, we see a mark being placed to those who will meet Christ without tasting death. That's the sealing process. And this is the harvest time. Now let's go to let's see another version in 181.2, same chapter.
The midnight cry was first proclaimed prior to 1844.
You remember? Prior to 1844, who proclaimed the midnight cry? William Miller. You remember? Let's hear.
And the coming of the bridegroom was Christ coming to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary for the investigative judgment of the saints.
Right.
The investigation being in two sections. First, the judgment for the dead, and second, for the living. The cry must be repeated.
Right. So we are repeating what happened with William Miller when he started in 1844, when he was preaching the coming of Christ in 1844, but it was the coming of Christ into the Holy of Holies, right? And the cry?
The cry must be repeated.
Right.
Otherwise, we would have no present truth for the time of the judgment of the living.
Right.
The cry for the living. The cry for the living being of a greater importance to the world than one of the dead.
Right. We are more interested in the judgment of the living than of the dead, because of the dead is already final. But this one, which is separating the wheat from the tares, from those who are living, who are supposed to meet Christ without testing them, is more solemn and important to you and I, because that's what we are in.
And as the virgins are a figure of the living church, the parable must have a direct application to the church at the present time.
Right.
The coming of the bridegroom for the judgment of the living.
Right.
But indirectly, it points back to the commencement of the midnight cry.
It happened in the midnight cry when William Miller started. They were waiting for the coming of Christ. Now it is the antitype of what happened when they were there, supposed to wait for the bridegroom. Now, in our time, we are now waiting for the bridegroom. This parable of the 10 virgins should be more marked in our time. Yeah?
But indirectly, it points back to the commencement of the midnight cry.
Right.
The first angel's message, the judgment for the dead.
Right.
The messages being of the same event, judgment, both for the living and for the dead, are called the midnight cry.
Right.
The same is proven by the parable itself.
Right. So this midnight cry is what is called the judgment. Is the time that we are in. This is what Sister White saw when he went to early writing. Go to early writing, page 277. She said, the messages on the fourth angel coming to join the third was like a midnight cry. Read.
I saw angels hurrying to and fro in heaven, descending to the earth and again ascending to heaven, preparing for the fulfillment of some important event.
What is this important event now? As we are studying, it's the judgment of the living. They had to rush to and fro now, the judgment being extended to the living, hurrying to and fro, preparing for the judgment of the living. And what?
Then I saw another mighty angel commissioned to descend to the earth to unite his voice with the third angel and give power and force to his message. Great power and glory were imparted to the angel. And as he descended, the earth was lightened with his glory.
Right.
The light which attended this angel penetrated everywhere.
Right.
As he cried mightily with a strong voice,
right.
Babylon the Great is fallen,
That's the main loud cry message which penetrated everywhere. That's Revelation chapter 18. Babylon is fallen. Babylon is fallen. Now, let's hear how mighty this angel was. Early writing, page 118. First paragraph, just on your inbox. Yeah.
Okay. I then saw the third angel,
right? Said
my accompanying angel,
right?
Fearful is his work,
right?
Awful is his mission,
right?
He is the angel that is to select the wheat from the tares.
You see, there is an angel which was assigned to go with the reapers. But this angel, Sister White was saying, I saw this angel coming to separate the wheat from the tares. Fearful. He is the angel. Fearful is his work, right? Awful is his mission. Did you hear this angel coming to separate in the harvest? He is fearful and is awful. The mission is so awful to separate the wheat from the tares in the judgment of the living. Now, finish off. He is
the angel that is to select the wheat from the tares,
right? And
seal or bind the wheat for the heavenly Ghana.
Right?
These things should engross the whole mind, the whole attention.
Right. That's early writing, page 118, the first paragraph. That the angel who comes to do this pretty work. So we should know, if this is the time of the sealing, this angel is busy now. He is busy with us in the judgment of the living. In the time we are receiving the threefold seal, this angel is fearful and awful is his mission, like what we have read. Now, Revelation 14 verse 12, what does it say about this angel?
He is the patience of the saints.
Patience of the saints.
Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus.
Now, these are people now keeping the commandments of God and also the faith of Jesus. In our time, there should be people keeping the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And what is the faith of Jesus? It's the living spiritual prophets. They have a prophet like it was when it started in the judgment of the dead in 1844. Sister White was the prophet who was also proclaiming a message during the judgment of the dead. Now, in the judgment of the living, there also should be a living prophet making sure that these messages, the three seals, are accepted by the people so that they are taken care of in the time of trouble, such as never was. They should be sealed. They are sealed for the work which Christ is coming to do, to harvest the whole world. Now, let's read again in Testimonies to Ministers. I think we have read that one. We read that one. I read that one, 234. Shall we go then? We want to find out about this Revelation chapter 18. Since we know Revelation chapter 18 is a separate angel from Revelation chapter 14 verse 9, which was Sister White, the third angel's message. Revelation 18 is not the third angel's message. Comes to top up what the third angel's message is. Comes with this angel to separate the wheat from the tares. Now, let's hear from Review and Herald, December 27, 1890. And you see 1890 is just about the time the message of 1888 had just been rejected. So there is this Review and Herald on that. And also, if you can't find the Review and Herald, go to Christ Our Righteousness, page 49. So let's hear from there, about the angel of Revelation 18.
God has sent to his people testimonies of truth and righteousness.
Right.
And they are called to lift up Jesus and to exalt his righteousness.
Right.
Those whom God has sent with a message are only men. But what is the character of the message which they bear?
What is this message now which is sent to the reapers? Because the reapers have got a message to separate the wheat and tares, starting first with the house of God. What is this message? We are studying because we understand Revelation chapter 18 is the time of the harvest, which that angel is sent, right?
Will you dare to turn from or make light of the warnings because God did not consult you as to what would be preferred? God calls men who will speak.
Now, when Revelation 18 is in action, God calls for men who will speak. There are men who don't speak. But let me tell you one thing. He calls for those who speak. Because there are some people who see evil and they don't speak. But God is calling for men in Revelation chapter 18, calling for men who will utter, who will speak their mind. They will speak what God has told them to speak. Now, here, Riviera says, God in this angel of Revelation 18 calls for men who will speak. Right, read.
God calls for men who will speak.
Right.
Who will cry aloud and spare not.
They don't just speak. They cry. They cry aloud. They will spare not. No, there is no respect. They are called, in the time even the world has proclaimed that there is freedom of expression. So you go nowhere. When there is freedom, it's a right. It's a right. Freedom of expression is a right. When they have called for freedom of expression, you go nowhere. They will speak. They will cry aloud and spare not. They will never cover any sin. They will say it out. They will call a spade by its name. Do you understand? These are the men God is looking for in the time of trouble. That's why you see most of them are young children, are young boys, young girls, young ones. Because the old ones, they have a tendency of not speaking. They don't speak. You remember when Moses was going to Canaan leading that tribe, all those above 20, they were laid to rest. They didn't speak. They don't even know, discern the Spirit of God. They are used to laying things with bias and preconceived ideas. God wants those who do not follow preconceived or follow bias. These are the ones that he uses in the time of the judgment of the living, when the seal is placed in the forehead. These are the ones that will come along with Revelation 18. And you do not even tell them that they are young, because the spirit in them is bigger than you. You understand? Now read on.
God calls men who will speak,
right?
Who will cry aloud and spare not.
Like it was with Eli, the prophet Eli. Samuel was just 3 years old, but he was speaking while Eli wasn't speaking. So in the time of the Revelation chapter 18 message, God calls for men who will speak when this angel comes. You know, we saw when the angel of the third angel's message came, it was a movement of the Sabbath keepers. And also Revelation 18, when it starts, it's a big movement. It's a movement, but of people who speak. There are people who speak who will not say, no, this one don't say, no, this one, no. They speak out for God. They are the very stones that when God said, when you keep silent, you raise the stones. People will speak, right?
God has raised up his messengers to do his work for this time. Some have turned from the message of the righteousness of Christ to criticize the men.
Right. You see what they do when they don't speak? They criticize. Their job is to criticize the people who God has raised to speak, to say out. Now, some rise against those who speak. Right. In Revelation chapter 18, just to read it from this one. Okay. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Right. You see, when they speak, the world is lightened with the glory because they speak out what God has given them. God enjoys using people who speak, not dumb dogs. He says, these are dumb dogs, they don't bark. But these are dogs who bark. You understand? They bark when, you ask those who keep dogs. A good dog is the one that shows you there's an enemy coming. There's something wrong outside. If it barks, the owner loves the dog that bark, not the. It says here in Isaiah 56, oh, they are greedy dogs. They lie on their tummy. They are all, greedy. Why greedy? You take people's tithe and everything and you eat and you don't bark. You should bark once you have been fed. Bark. Here, let's read from a word to the little flock. It's commenting about Revelation chapter 14. It's got 5 angels' messages, right?
What?
Page 11.
Okay. What are they in prophecy? Sister White predicted what would come to God's people.
Right? What was supposed to come to God's people? Was it up to Revelation chapter 9, chapter 14, verse 9? Third angel's message. Was it what was supposed to come to God's people? No. Sister White, she said out in the word to the little flock, all five
of the angels brought to view in this chapter represent 5 distinct messages.
5 distinct messages were supposed to come to God's people, and they will come. And those who receive the 5 distinct messages on Revelation 14, verse 6 to 17, these are 5 angels. They are not 3 angels. They are 5 angels. Those who receive those 5 will receive the seal of God. And these are the people God is calling upon in the judgment of the living. This is the judgment of the living. When they receive their seal, they've gone as far as 5 angels' message. And this is the 5 angels, the 5 messages, which in Revelation 14, verse 6 up to 17, should come to the people who are supposed to be sealed. Those who are not being sealed, they go up to third angel. But those who are going to be sealed, they take the whole 5 angels' messages. They are sealed. Because Sister White confirms through the word to the little flock. Somebody said, no, it's not Sister White who wrote. Yes, it's James White who wrote. Why? Because James White was also approved to write. I can give you a quotation which shows that James White was approved by inspiration to write that. Go to 3T, 502. Testimonies for the Church, volume 3, page 502, second paragraph. So those who are coming, trying to cheat you, saying this is not Sister White writing, this is James, this is the husband, James White, the husband is not the one writing, but why is he permitted to write in the spirit of prophecy, in the SOP? Why is he being permitted? Now let's read why he is permitted. Because the devil is grabbing that advantage, coming to people, oh, this is word to the little flock is not from Sister White, it's from her husband. But why was the husband permitted to write the SOP? Let's read it from Testimonies for the Church, volume 3, page 502. Second paragraph. Yeah?
God has permitted the precious light of truth to shine upon his word and illuminate the mind of my husband.
Did you hear what Sister White is talking about? But when she says Uriah Smith is not inspired, why do you uphold Uriah Smith? But now she is saying, my husband has been inspired to write this book. You say, this is not the husband. And the devil is so cunning. You've got to read very hard to fight that thing called the devil. He is so cunning and uses cunning things unless you get the Spirit of God to fight the devil. You understand? If the scripture is in the spirit of prophecy, it has been permitted by inspiration to be there. So do not allow people to come and say, this is not from Sister White. This is, as long as it is from SOP, it has been allowed to be there. Now Sister White is saying, God has permitted the precious light of truth to shine upon his word and illuminate the mind of my husband. You understand? And what?
He may reflect the rays of light from the presence of Jesus upon others by his preaching and writing.
Right. So all the prophets, most of them, they were not writing anything. Sister White wasn't writing. She wrote some of the books but did not write all. She had writers who were writing for her. Even Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, if you go to Jeremiah chapter 36, verse 4, you find there was a writer there. But you believe Jeremiah so much. But he was not writing. He had a writer. Now go to chapter 36, verse 4. Yeah.
Then Jeremiah called Baruch,
right,
the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote from the mouth of Jeremiah.
Do you see? He had someone who was writing. He was not the one writing. Like it is. Sister White had her husband writing. She had her son William writing. She had even other writers, which we can, if you want a whole topic of who was writing for her. Yeah. So do not be fooled. When things are in the spirit of prophecy, she has permitted those things to be written. Now, let's go on. Let's go on and head on. What was their message? What is the message of Revelation 18? We have seen it says, read verse 18.
Verse 18.
I'm in chapter 18.
Verse 1.
Revelation, verse 1. What is the message?
And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory.
Right? So, it's Revelation 18. And what happened?
Verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
So the message of Revelation 18 is to expose what Babylon is. Is it? It's a movement exposing what Babylon is. Is it? And making sure people do not receive the beast, the mark of the beast from Babylon. Is it? That's Revelation 18, right? Now, let's go to Revelation 14, verse 16 to 17. Start from verse 14. Because we know up to verse 9 is the third angel's message. Now, for verse 14, what is it?
And I looked, and behold, a white cloud.
Right.
And upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man.
Right.
Having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle.
Right. So it's the harvest. He's got a sickle. And that sickle should show you that this is a harvest. This is the message we are in right now. Of the sharp sickle. And what?
And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud.
Right.
Thrust in thy sickle.
Thrust in the sickle.
And reap.
And reap. So it's the harvest. Did you hear? So that's the angel of Revelation 18 coming to thrust in the sickle for the harvest. And we have seen Revelation 18 is the same repetition of what was in Revelation 14 verse 8. William Miller said, Babylon is fallen. Now Revelation 18 says, Babylon is also fallen. Because Sister White said, it's going to be repeated. That is going to be repeated before the coming of Christ. Repeated in our time as judgment of the living, or in the harvest where the wheat is separated from the tares. Right? Now, let's hear from Sister White. A great controversy, page 604, first paragraph. You can read it from the first paragraph. Let's hear what happens in this Revelation chapter
604.
18. 604, yes.
Of Babylon.
Yeah.
Of Babylon.
Of Babylon. That's Revelation 18 is proclaiming about Babylon. Babylon is fallen. Now, of Babylon.
Of Babylon.
Yeah.
At the time brought to view in this prophecy.
Right.
It is declared, her sins have reached unto heaven.
Right.
And God hath remembered her iniquities.
So it means when Revelation 18 is proclaimed, there is something that was awfully wrong in the house of God, which now God is saying the cup is full of whatever is wrong, which are the sins of Babylon, has reached its time to be harvested. Why? Because the sins now have filled the whole heaven. This is what happened.
She has filled up the measure of her guilt.
So the cup is full. So that's when Revelation 18 comes. It does not come in the time of 1833 with William Miller, where he said, proclaimed the sins of Babylon on those churches that reformed. And they also fell in William Miller's time. But it's the time when the probation is now about full, and the sins which were in Babylon are now full. And what?
She has filled up the measure of her guilt.
Right.
And destruction is about to fall upon her.
So it's the time when near Christ coming, where destruction is about to strike the earth. Right?
But God still has a people in Babylon.
In that time, God has a people still in Babylon. still worshipping amongst these sins.
And before the visitation of his judgments, these faithful ones must be called out.
These faithful ones must be informed before the coming of Christ. They should be informed that what you are doing, you are actually promoting Babylon instead of promoting God. They should be told.
But God still has a people in Babylon.
Yeah.
And before the visitation of his judgment, these faithful ones must be called out.
They should be called out. Yeah.
That they partake not of her sins and receive not of her plagues.
You see, they should not. So someone will say, I don't care whatever, whoever is leading, whether he's wrong or not. But he says, God is saying, you are partaking of the sins. You are partaking of the sins. Because when he say, come, let's have Lord's Supper during 11 o'clock, you will do it. You are partaking. You will do it. When he says, we don't care, we just have to have meat as long as it's clean, we are partaking of it. When he says, we are not going to keep feasts, so they don't have the feast in their syllabus, you partake of it. When they say, okay, you come meeting any date and all that, you partake of it. So God is saying, for they are partaking of the sins of Babylon. These have got to be called out before the final visitation. And we saw the final visitation was Ezekiel 9. That's the final visitation. We saw it, Sister White said. He went to those who did not have the mark. So, what were they? They were partaking of the sins. Did you understand? Now, here, read on.
Hence the movement symbolized.
Hence the movement. Do you see Revelation 18 is a movement? Hence the movement.
Symbolized by the angel coming down from heaven.
Right.
Lightening the earth with his glory and crying mightily with a strong voice.
Right.
Announcing the sins of Babylon.
Right.
In connection with his message, the call is heard.
There is a call.
Come out of her.
Of coming out of Babylon.
My people.
My people. We're saying, it's Christ saying, come out of Babylon. I told somebody, I said, I worship God according to how it was with Adam. Adam did not have any way, any wall, nothing. He knew what God wanted. On a Sabbath, he rested. On a new moon, he rested. On a feast of Passover, on a tabernacle, on a Pentecost, on a day of atonement, he just did what God wanted. This is what I do. These cages, God is saying, come out of here, my people. This is the time when Christ was talking to the Samaritan woman, that there is a time when you will neither in that mountain nor in Jerusalem, you will neither worship God in any place. Look how God has done. We are in a time we don't even have walls right now. Is it not in conjunction with the word from Revelation 18? We have learned to live without walls. A full year, 2020, full year, no walls. They are trying to make sure you come with walls. I've seen people trying to make sure they make virtual walls. They try to contain with the virtual walls and put Zoom and everything to make sure they contain the numbers of the people they contain. There's nothing in that Zoom except knowing each other and face to face and whatever. They use it even at work and everything. But the main aim is to contain you in your wall. But let me tell you one thing. Those who are going to be marked will be having nothing to do with. Revelation chapter 14 will tell you that these are they who never were defiled by women. Never, never. And God is making it possible for those who are supposed to receive the three seals. That they will have nothing to do with being in someone's cage. Someone's cage, so that it continues to hammer our policy. Our policy doesn't have peace. Our policy, this is not our denomination. This is not in. I should say this is not in the Bible. But you will see people who say something in the Bible. They say it's not in our policy, but it is in the Bible. So you see how these cages are doing. They're taking you off the Bible to do what someone wants. This is not the time. The time of the judgment of the living is the time of separation. Those who want a thus said the Lord, and those who want fables and laws from man-made rules. But we want the Bible and the Bible only. Now, let's read on Ellen G. White letter 106 in 1902. She wrote that one, Ellen G. White. So to Sister White, this message was still future to her, the message of Revelation 18. Now, the whole of Revelation 18, in where you were reading, just where you were reading, come out of page 604, the first paragraph. If you can't see it, the whole of Revelation 18, you can't see it.
Yeah, found it. The whole of Revelation 18 will be fulfilled in the glorious closing of this work.
Do you see what Sister White says? The whole of Revelation 18 will be fulfilled in the glorious closing of this work. And what?
It has not yet been fulfilled.
It had not been
and
fulfilled
yet
in
the light,
the time, right?
And yet the light began to shine in that strange and impressive way at Minneapolis.
The light of Revelation 18 began to shine in the meeting, so began to shine in that strange and impressive way at Minneapolis. So what happened at Minneapolis? And what? Finish.
The only reasonable conclusion is that the light was put out by human instrumentalities.
So when it came with 80 Johns in 1888 at Minneapolis, the only reasonable conclusion is that the light was put out by human instrumentalities. This is what Sister White says. Those who rejected the 1888 message put off the light which had come to give us the judgment of the living. This is what Sister White is saying. Go there in 18 and read down below in Testimonies to Ministers, page 59. Start in 1888 at the General Conference. Yeah.
In 1888, at the General Conference held in Minneapolis, the angel of Revelation 18 verse 1 came down to do his work and was ridiculed, criticized, and rejected.
Now, this is the book from Sister White which says Ellen G. White in Taking Up a Reproach. So she confirmed that in 1888 at the General Conference held in Minneapolis, the angel of Revelation 18 verse 1 came down to do his work. Now, and he was ridiculed, criticized, and rejected. She confirmed that in the book Ellen G. White in Taking Up a Reproach. Yeah? It was rejected. Read on.
It was rejected because it was brought by humble instrumentality.
This is why it was rejected. Because it did not go through the channels that people expect. It came through humble instrumentalities. This is what happened.
God will always surprise us.
And this is what God does. When we want God to bring a message, you can set up anyone who say this is a proper one, is a proper channel, this is a proper, the channel is wrong, but the message is right, because God wants to surprise you. So many times we expect God to bring messages through pastors, isn't it? But God says in Amos chapter 3, verse 7, He does not work through, He only works through prophets. When He has a message, check in the Bible, when He had a message, He sent a prophet. You check in the Bible, when David was the leader, was not a prophet. But when he erred, he sent Nathaniel. He didn't send a pastor. He sent all his secrets are with the prophets. This is what happened. So in 1888, because it did not come through the channels that they thought were the proper ones, it came through prophets. So when it comes through a prophet, when the message comes through a prophet, people reject. Why? Because the channel that they are used to is not the prophet. They are not used to a channel of the prophet. They are used to channel of ministers. But God clearly says in the Bible, the message comes with a prophet. In the Amos chapter 3 verse 7 says, the message is brought by prophets. The secrets of God are told to a prophet. They are all released to a prophet. There is no way we say to an evangelist or to a teacher or to a minister. Never. And I can see some, they call themselves, we are the voice of God. It has never happened in the Bible. The only voice of God comes from the prophet. This is true. Check the Bible from Genesis up to Revelation. He has never used that channel. He will only use the prophet. Look at how he wrote the Bible through Moses. It was the prophet. Whether Aaron and Miriam were there, but he used the particular prophet. Jeremiah, Isaiah, Christ. That's why they rejected Christ. Because it did not come through the priesthood. Through the priests. He was a prophet. John the Baptist was rejected. He was a prophet. That's why they did not take the messages from prophets. They want to take from other channels which are strange from the Bible. The Bible uses a prophet. Now, in 1888, this sent a message which was ridiculed. Why? Because it was not a proper channel. Now, read on. It was rejected.
It was rejected because it was brought by humble instrumentalities. God will always surprise us,
right?
Because we always expect man in higher positions to bring light.
Right.
The second angel's message was to go to Babylon,
right,
the churches, proclaiming her downfall,
right,
and calling the people to come out of her.
Right.
This same message is to be proclaimed the second time.
Right.
And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory.
This is Testimonies to Ministers, page 59. So, this same message was promised that it will come again. When it was rejected, William Miller proclaimed it in 1844. It was rejected by the churches who had reformed. But these have since fallen from 1833. But in our time, it is still going to be proclaimed to someone for the other people who are upright. And when they reject, they fall. Let's go to Great Controversy, page 383, 1889 edition. So read from that. That was in 1888.
That was in 1888 at General Conference at Minneapolis.
Right.
In the 18th chapter of the Revelation, in a message which is yet future, the people of God are called upon to come out of Babylon.
Right. When it came in 1888, it was rejected. But when it comes back again, the people of God will be called to come out of Babylon. Now, Sister White is repeating that when it came in 1888 by A.T. Jones, it did not come to the world. It came to the people of God in the house of God. And when it is repeated, where does it go? Same area where the 1888 message went. Now, do you understand the Revelation 18 comes to us to call people to worship God, to be sealed, and come out of Babylon, my people. This is what happens. Let's hear from Psalms, the book of Psalms, 119, page 119, verse 172.
My tongue,
171.
My tongue shall speak of thy word.
Right.
For all thy commandments are righteous.
Right? My tongue shall speak of thy word, for all the commandments are righteous. Now, when they brought the righteousness by faith, it was the two laws that they wanted from Galatians. They were told to keep the moral and the ceremonial law, and Sister White seconded it. If you want, you can read the whole book 1 of Selected Messages, page 233 and 234, and this is what happened in Minneapolis. We are not going to be repeating all the time. Someone was saying, A.T. Jones and Wagner didn't bring the ceremonial law. You read more. Read more before you argue. Read more. Go and read from book 1, Selected Messages, page 233 and 234, and see how it was rejected. Now, let's read again. Go to Selected Messages, book 1. Let's read it. Page 233. The zeal the churches have is not according to the knowledge. Right. So what zeal? when God says we have a zeal, but it's not according to knowledge, you understand it today, what it means. The zeal that we have is not according to knowledge. But what does the knowledge say? Now read on. Mm-hmm.
The feasts are not kept according to God's times.
Right. So when you go to a camp meeting without the time which is written in the Bible, you've got a good zeal, but not according to the knowledge. The knowledge says on that date, on the 15th day of the 7th month, and then you go anyway with a zeal which is not according to knowledge in the Bible. This is the zeal which is not according to knowledge. It's like someone wants to keep the Sabbath and keeps it on Tuesday. He's got a zeal to keep the Sabbath, but it's not according to the time which is prescribed in the Bible. It's a zeal not according to knowledge. This is what is called by a zeal not according to knowledge. You find somebody has got a zeal to keep the Lord's Supper, and he keeps it on a date which is not in the Bible, and on a time when the Bible actually says it's supper, and he keeps it as a breakfast. He's got a zeal to keep the Lord's Supper, but it's not according to knowledge. Now here he says, when the feasts are not kept in according to God's times, it's a zeal without knowledge. Now let's hear what A.T. Jones was prescribing according to what we should keep, the 10 Commandments and the ceremonial law. Now they went to Sister White, because they were reading the book of Galatians, where it says the law was our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ's righteousness. And which law was A.T. Jones talking about? It was both the moral and the ceremonial. But the brethren in Minneapolis were saying, no, we only uphold the moral, like what others are still doing here in 2020. They say only our moral is the ceremonial law. No. The ceremonial law, we are not saying go and kill the lambs, but we are saying the feasts, the times of the feasts are still binding. They are a shadow of things. In verse 17 of Colossians 2, verse 17 says, these are a shadow of things to come. So we can't nail a shadow. But now, A.T. Jones and Wagner were saying both the ceremonial and the moral laws, those two should be kept. Oh, he was actually saying both the feasts and the 10 Commandments should be kept. Now, they went to Sister White. Listen to what Sister White says in page 233, volume 1, book 1.
I am asked concerning the law in Galatians.
Right.
What law is the schoolmaster to bring us to Christ?
Mm-hmm.
I answer, both the ceremonial and the moral code of 10 Commandments.
These are the laws that bring us to Christ. This is what she answered. Those who were asking that A.T. Jones and Wagner, they are saying we should keep both the moral and the feasts. But yes, Sister White confirmed that yes, both of them, they will bring you to Christ. Now, listen, when you know for sure your syllabus does not have this code of conduct of the ceremonial law, you only have the moral. How then do you expect to be righteous? How then do you expect to be brought to, because Sister White confirms here, I am asked concerning the law of Galatians. That's the aim of the Revelation chapter 18. It was the law of Galatians, like it was in A.T. Jones. This is what is being repeated in our time. And those two laws, the ceremonial law, which are the feasts, and the moral law, is what they were advocating. But the brethren at Minneapolis were refusing the ceremonial law or the feasts. But they went to Sister White. Sister White said, I am asked concerning the law in Galatians. What law is the schoolmaster to bring us to Christ? Now, you see, there is a schoolmaster to bring us to righteousness of Christ. I answer, both the ceremonial and the moral code of 10 Commandments. Now, so we were told that judgment of the living will bring back all the sanctuary laws. So do you see which sanctuary laws are testing the ones who are being investigated for judgment of the living? They are being tested by these two laws, the moral law and the ceremonial law, which are the feasts. The feast, that's why even Malachi chapter 4, verse 4 to 5 says, remember ye the law which I gave Moses on Mount Horeb. with the statutes and judgment. Why? The ceremonial laws or the feasts and the moral law, both of them are to bring us to Christ. This is what they went to ask Sister White in the time of 80 John. And this is what she's saying is going to be repeated in our time. Now, let's read on there. Right. So we saw that she was asked about that. But did the brethren adhere to what she advised? Until today. But in the judgment of living, God said in the time of 1888, he winked and said, let both grow together until the harvest. Now in the harvest, the tares and the wheat will be separated by that mark. What mark will separate the tares and the wheat? The mark that will separate the tares and the wheat is the keeping of both laws, the moral and the feast. Those two will separate someone who is keeping the feast and someone who is not keeping the feast. Because the moral law, we are all agreeing, we keep. So we'll keep the moral law and the feast. But this is what God is using to separate the wheat from the tares. Now, I think I lost my page somewhere. Read on, you've got where I read. What is it? Oh yeah, I've got it. Now it's a bit longish, but it's just our last. Our promise is our last quote. E.G. White, manuscript to release 1888. Start from it where it says, to receive the mighty angel. Just after book 1, to page 233 there. To receive the mighty angel in Revelation 18.
Okay.
You found it? Or can I read it for you?
To receive the mighty angel,
right?
We need to accept and understand Revelation 18.
For us to understand the sealing process, or to receive this mighty angel who comes at the time before Christ comes, we need to understand Revelation 18. Now, have you understood what Revelation 18 means? It's a repetition of the message which came from 1888 message, from 80 Jones and Wagona, which was rejected by human instrumentalities. But it comes, as promised by Sister White, it will come at the last day, at the last time, which will swell into a loud cry in our time to separate the wheat from the tares. Now, to receive the mighty angel, we need to understand Revelation 18. Now, read on.
I know it would be dangerous to denounce Dr. Wagner's position as wholly erroneous.
Mm-hmm.
This would please the enemy.
Right?
I see the beauty of truth.
Sister White is talking there, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I see the beauty of truth in the presentation of the righteousness of Christ in relation to the law as the doctor has placed it before us.
Now, he had already elaborated Revelation 18 and this code of conduct from Galatians chapter 4, which was taking us into the righteousness of Christ, which is the schoolmaster, which involved two laws, the moral law and the ceremonial law of the feasts, right? Now, she is saying this would please the enemy if we reject Dr. Wakona. Now, that which has been presented, right? Listen, she's advising us to go back to the message in 1888, which was presented by Wagona, that it was inspired of God. Read on.
That which has been presented harmonizes perfectly with the light which God has been pleased to give me during all the years of my experience. If our ministering brethren would accept the doctrine which has been presented so clearly, the righteousness of Christ in connection with the law.
So the righteousness of Christ was in connection with these laws. The feasts and the moral law. Ceremonial and moral law. So if the brethren would accept, that's what Sister White is saying, if the brethren would accept this clear message from Wagona. Now read on.
And I know they need to accept this.
They need to accept this.
Their prejudices would not have a controlling power, and the people would be fed.
And prejudiced won't give them the power.
their prejudices would not have a controlling power, and the people would be fed with their portion of meat in due season.
Right. So this was to come and feed the people with their portion of meat in due season. So what is meat in due season, which Christ said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 48, down below? It says, you will find a servant giving the meat in due season. Now, what was the meat in due season? What 80 Jones and Wagona had brought, which is the feast and the moral law. That's what is called meat in due season by Sister White. And read on.
I see no excuse for the wrought up state of feeling that has been created at this meeting.
Right?
This is the first time I have had opportunity to listen to anything in reference to this subject.
Right?
I have had no conversation in regard to it with my son W.C. White, with Dr. Wagner, or with Elder A.T. Jones.
Right?
At this meeting, I have heard for the first time Dr. Wagner's reason for his position.
That was the first time Sister White was hearing Wagner presenting the righteousness by faith. And he says, I've never heard, and what I've heard is exactly in harmony with what God has told me before. And he's saying, the brethren should listen to Wagner, otherwise this prejudice that they have does not work. It will not give them the power to preach the meat in due season. So, the meat in due season was neglected in 1888. Till today. But God says, who is that servant? Now, go to Matthew chapter 24, that's the verse. Who is let's see what God says in Matthew chapter 24 about this meat in due season. Now, start from 48.
48.
Yeah.
But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his...
Start from 42.
Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come.
That's what Matthew says. You do not know what to watch. You should watch therefore. Now, what is to watch? Right?
Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up.
So he's talking about the brethren who were there in 1888. If they knew that this rejection of that message of the feast and the moral which are brought by A.T. Jones and Wagner, if they had upheld it, they would have watched. They would have watched. But because they rejected the feasts and only upheld the moral law, they are not watching. They will not watch. The coming of Christ will be like a thief. Now read. If they had known what to watch, if they had set to watch, then the thief you actually will know what time the thief is coming. But because you don't watch, you are sleeping. The thief will just come without you knowing. Why? Because they neglected the feast. They neglected the very message which was going to cause them to watch for the coming of Christ. That's why we see in great controversy saying even the coming of the second coming of Christ is there in the symbolic service. So they could have kept the symbolic service so that when the death of Christ comes, they will be watching. Now read.
Therefore, be ye also ready.
You will also be ready.
For in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh.
Right. Because you will take you unaware if you are not ready. Right? And
who then is a faithful and wise servant?
Then he is now looking for a faithful and wise servant. Who is what?
Whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household.
Why?
To give them meat in due season.
To give them the 1888 message from Wagner back to the people. Who is this servant who will give this message which has been rejected in 1888 of meat in due season? Let's go back where you are reading. It says, at this meeting I have heard for the first time Dr. Wagner's reasons for his position. Now read on.
I have had no conversation in regard to it with my son W.C. White, with Dr. Wagner, or with A.T. Jones. At this meeting, I have heard for the first time Dr. Wagner's reasons for his position. It is certain that many have come to this meeting with false impressions and perverted opinions.
So they went to the meeting in Minneapolis with false what?
Impressions
and perverted opinions. These bias, these preconceived ideas, just to seal themselves with rejection before even listening to the message. This is what happened. And what?
They have imaginings that have no foundation in truth.
Their imaginings have no foundation. Like I heard some people say, we have searched this book, this chapter truth, we searched it. They did not, let me tell you, believe me or not, they did not search it. If they searched it, they would find nothing wrong, because what he wrote is exactly what Sister White is writing. So they did not. Now, they came to that meeting exactly the same way. They just planned it as, we will not listen. They just bar the ears not to listen to A.T. Jones and Wagon.
They have imaginings that have no foundation in truth.
There was no foundation in truth.
Even if the position which we have held upon the two laws is true,
right?
The Spirit of truth will not countenance any such measures to defend as many of you would take. So you see, the
debate was on the two laws. The moral law and the ceremonial law, which are the feasts. The moral law and the ceremonial, Sister White said they have imaginings. They did not have a thus said the Lord to reject that. They only had imaginings that have no foundation of truth. That's what they do when they tell you about the feast that they were nailed. You ask them if they are nailed, so why are we keeping the new moon and the new heaven and new earth? They have no basis from the truth. They just reject it. They say new moon is all, the verse actually in Colossians 2 verse 17 actually says they are a shadow of things to come. And they say they are all nullified by the cross. They had no basic of rejecting the truth. This is exactly what they are doing even now. They have no basis to reject the feast. They have not even thus said the Lord. They have imaginings. This is what they are using the same way. Read on.
Even if the position which we have held upon the two laws is truth,
right?
The Spirit
so Sister White proclaimed that the position which they had upon the two laws of the ceremonial and the moral law was correct. Sister White is endorsing it. It's correct, right? Even the position to read.
Even if the position which we have held upon the two laws is truth, the Spirit of truth will not countenance any such measures to defend it as many of you would take.
Right?
Said my guide, there is much light yet to shine forth from the law of God and the gospel of righteousness.
Angel said, don't worry, there's still more light to shine with these feasts. It's still coming. When? In our time, judgment of the living is there. It's there to separate the wheat from the tares. Now read one and finish that one.
This message, understood in its true character and proclaimed in the Spirit, will lighten the earth with His glory.
Right. So this is E.G. White manuscript 1888. This is where we are reading from. Now read also there, we must present the law.
We must present the law and the gospel together.
Now there is what is called the law is the moral law, and what is called the gospel. Now the Bible should tell the Spirit of God should tell us what is the gospel. The next sentence there.
The gospel in Leviticus
23. That's the feast. So these feasts are called gospel. This is what is called the gospel. This feast. The law is the 10 Commandments. But you will never have the law without the gospel. We have these two. One is called the law, the moral law. And we also have the gospel. And here we are told the gospel is in Leviticus 23 verse 1 to 44. That's what is called the gospel. So if you are going to go without feast, you got no gospel. You got no, God has got to be worshipped with the law and the gospel. And what is the gospel? That's the two where we find the patience of the saints. Here is the patience of the saints. They have the law and the gospel. Yeah? Read on. To receive the mighty angel. Right? To receive
the mighty angel, we need to accept and understand the law in Exodus 20.
That's where it is, right? And what?
The commandments and the gospel in Leviticus 23. The
These
statutes.
Two, when these two are not there, there's no gospel. There's no gospel. We need to worship God to understand the law on Exodus chapter 20. And the next door is Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 20. That's where we find the gospel. That's why I said this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached. The gospel. We have the gospel of the kingdom. The gospel of the kingdom are the feasts. Now you cannot enter the feast without the gospel of the kingdom. It will be preached in all nations for a testimony, for a witness, and the end shall come. This is the last message before the kingdom is established. It's the gospel. We have been all along keeping the commandments, the 10 commandments, but we need the gospel. That's why Malachi is raised in Malachi 4 verse 45 with the gospel. We have the statutes and judgment. This is the gospel. Read on. What is the gospel? The statutes?
The statutes.
1.
Or the Lord's feast.
These are the Lord's feasts. 2.
That is the Passover feast. Pentecost. And Tabernacles.
Feast of Tabernacles.
Day of Atonement. And so on.
And these
must be kept according to the dates stated in Leviticus.
Right?
For Christ did not nail those times.
Right. So go to Testimonies to Ministers, volume 6, page 392. And say the Old Testament.
The Old Testament.
What Sister White says, the Old Testament
is as verily the gospel in types and shadows as the New Testament.
Do you see the Old Testament is where we find the gospel? Right? The types and shadows of the New Testament.
Is in its unfolding power.
So the New Testament is the unfolding power of the gospel from the Old Testament. The New Testament right?
is only the advancement and unfolding of the Old.
No, the New Testament does not. That's what
the New Testament does not present a new religion.
When you are in the New Testament, you have no new religion. You have a continuous religion from the Old Testament. That's what Sister White says. Your religion, isn't it? The 10 Commandments were in the Old Testament. So we are continuing with them in the New Testament. So even the feasts were in the Old. And we continue with them in the New Testament. The only thing that was nailed are the animal sacrifices, which pointed to the body of Christ. But the religion in the Old continues in the New. This is what Sister White says. And what?
The New Testament is only the advancement and unfolding of the Old.
Right.
The gospel is given in precept in Leviticus. Implicit obedience is required
now as then. Now is Sister White saying implicit obedience to Leviticus chapter 23 is required now as then. Testimonies for the Church, volume 6, page 392. Go and read and enjoy for yourself. If it was not for time, we could have finished. We had a lot of testimonies just to prove that these feasts are there to put a seal to the 144,000. The moral law, the feasts are the gospel, which are supposed to be complete and separating the wheat from the tares. Revelation 18, which came in 1888, is now being repeated in judgment of the living. You and I must not miss the seals that are being placed on the foreheads of the 144,000. May God bless this lesson so that it may have positive impression into our brains. Blessed Sabbath.